One of the commenters on one of my past YouTube videos was pretty angry at the injustice that he felt was inflicted on people of color by the justice system. And he brought up the case of Marissa Alexander as one I should look into. So I went ahead and did a deep dive. Now, starting here with the Wikipedia article on her case, which is a good starting point. It just sort of kind of lays the foundation of what kind of happened. However, to do a real thorough job, you have to go deeper than this. So we can start with the Wikipedia article, and then we're going to find out that this case does teach some really important lessons that I think all of us should learn. Hello out there. I am trying to get through.
With his powerful brainwaves cradled in the warmth of reasoning, it's time for Johnnie Walker Dread to straighten you out on a thing or two. Emanating all the way from exciting Las Vegas, Oklahoma, it's the Johnnie Walker Dread Show.
Okay, so it begins. In May 2012, 31-year-old Marissa Alexander was prosecuted for aggravated assault with a lethal weapon and received a mandatory minimum sentence of 20 years in prison. Holy cow. Alexander said that she fired a warning shot after her husband attacked her and threatened to kill her on August 1st, 2010 in Jacksonville, Florida. So she fires a shot at her husband, but she's claiming that it was just a warning shot. In other words, that she was not trying to actually hit him with the bullet. However, as I have said before with the Kyle Rittenhouse case, you have to be careful with this. Self-defense typically requires an intent to actually shoot the person that's attacking you. A lot of people made a really dumb argument that the fact that Kyle intended to shoot his victims means he's guilty. On the contrary, the fact that he intended to shoot his attackers means that he can establish a self-defense case. If you don't try to shoot your attacker, you can't necessarily claim self-defense. There's a case law on that. I went over that in one of my other videos. Now, she claimed to have fired a warning shot. Who did she tell that to? Probably the police, and that backs up another claim I'm telling you. Don't talk to the cops. Nothing good comes when you talk to the police. What happened probably was that the police officers showed up and said, okay, tell us what happened. And by the way, we fully understand how these things happen. And we perfectly agree that if he attacked you, that firing a warning shot was a very sensible thing to do. Police are allowed to lie, and they're going to get you to say things that they can later pin on you. The police are not your friends. And this goes for people of all colors. Doesn't matter what race you are, who you are. Police are not your friends. Do yourself a favor. Gather your family around, especially if you have kids. Make them watch this video here called Don't Talk to the Police. It is one of the absolutely best videos I've ever seen. It really opens your eyes up and you start to think, yeah, talking to the police is a bad idea. And I don't mean don't talk to the police because you don't like them. Don't talk to the police because they're pigs. I'm saying don't talk to the police because it's not in your best interest. It's never in your best interest. What she should have done was said, I was scared for my life. I want to talk to my lawyer. And she would have been in much better shape. But let's go back. It says here, Alexander was released on January 27, 2015, 3 years later, under a plea deal that capped her sentence to the 3 years she had already served. And we're going to find out she got damn lucky here. Go on. Alexander was in the home of her estranged husband, Rico Gray, and that doesn't sound good right off the bat. Estranged husband, what's she doing in his home? When Alexander stated that Gray threatened to kill her via text on Alexander's phone. So let me see if I have this right. She's in his home and he's texting her? Doesn't sound right. Gray had previously abused Alexander, giving her reason to believe that her life was in danger. Okay, and this is unquestionable. I mean, there is ample evidence that Gray has treated her pretty rough. According to Alexander, she tried to escape through the garage, but the garage door would not open. This account was confirmed by Gray in a sworn deposition. So she claims the garage door would not open, and he comes in and says, yeah, that's right. Does that mean that it's true? Although investigators found no problem with the door. That's a problem. Now you think, well, wait a minute. Gray, the victim, also said that she couldn't get out because there was something wrong with the garage door. We'll see about that a little bit later. According to all accounts, Alexander then retrieves her gun from her vehicle. I guess the vehicle was in the garage. And went to the kitchen. Alexander fired a warning shot towards Gray with his children nearby, which hit the wall near Gray at the height of his head. Well, that's not a very good warning shot. You normally want to aim a little higher than that. And that was used against her, by the way. The very fact that this warning shot was actually pretty dangerous. With his children nearby, which hit the wall near Gray at the height of his head, then deflected into the ceiling. The single shot did not injure anyone, and that's kind of important to remember here. Even if she intended to shoot him, she actually didn't end up hitting him at all. According to one source, Alexander had fired the warning shot because of Florida's Stand Your Ground law, a law that allows self-defense, such as lethal force, in life-threatening situations. But a warning shot was not legal at that time. This is the problem when you talk to the police. She thought she was doing herself a favor. Well, I'll just tell the police that I only fired a warning shot. I didn't really intend to hit him at all, not knowing that that was going to get her convicted. Don't talk to the police. The lawyer could have taken her testimony privately and told her, look, warning shots are not legal. If you're going to make that claim, keep in mind, you could go to prison for this. However, if you acted in self-defense and tried to shoot him to stop a lethal threat, then we have maybe a self-defense claim. Given all that, now what's your testimony? And she could have looked at that and said, oh, shoot, I should not say that I fired a warning shot. I should say that I tried to hit him. Keep in mind, if you are really facing a lethal threat, it's going to be hard to claim that you fired a warning shot because you normally don't try to meet lethal threats with warning shots. That weakens your self-defense case. And in fact, in many states, it doesn't give you any self-defense case at all, like in Wisconsin. Don't talk to the police. Talk to the lawyer. The lawyer knows the laws. The police do too, and that's the reason why they're trying to get you to say that it was a warning shot, because they can get you for that. Alexander, who had a history of suffering domestic violence from Gray. Yes, Gray does not come off looking good here at all. He comes off as a real jerk. And obtained a restraining order because of it. Sought self-defense immunity prior to trial but was unsuccessful. Again, she claimed to have fired a warning shot. That may have been a factor in that. State Attorney Angela Corey met with the defendant and offered her a 3-year plea deal. Asserting that she acted in self-defense within the bounds of the law, Alexander rejected the offer and took her case to trial. If she was given counsel, that was a mistake. The counsel would have told her, look, you better take the 3-year deal. A jury convicted her in 12 minutes. That has to be about the shortest jury deliberation I've ever heard. And what it means is she really didn't have a very good case at all. She should have listened to the lawyer, took the 3-year deal. Or if she was acting as her own lawyer, well, we all know about that. Never do that. Always get a lawyer. And because of the Florida 10-20 life mandatory minimum statute, she was sentenced to 20 years in prison. 20 years. So what really happened? I think she just lost control of her anger. She grabbed a gun, went in there, and shot at him. She might have been firing a warning shot to scare him. Maybe she tried to kill him and missed. Whatever the case, it looks to me like she just kind of lost control of her emotions and discharged a firearm to kids nearby. That also didn't help her too much. Alexander was also requested to stay away from Gray as part of a court order. I think Gray was all for that. He was going, yep, good deal. I don't want her around at all. Okay, on September 26, 2013, an appellate court ordered a new trial, finding that the jury instructions in Alexander's trial impermissibly shifted the burden of proof from the prosecution to the defense. What have I been saying about Kyle Rittenhouse? I've had a few people say he has to show that it was self-defense. He's going to have to take the stand. No. In Wisconsin, just like in Florida, self-defense is an affirmative defense, which means that as long as the judge rules that there is ample evidence to suggest that there could have been self-defense in this case, the prosecution has to prove that there wasn't. The jury wasn't told this. And if the judge doesn't tell the jury in Kyle's case, then that could get overturned on appeal. Alexander was released on bail on November 27, 2013, and required to stay under house arrest. So she's on bail while she gets her new trial, and keep in mind, I'm all for that. As long as the bail secures the person's participation in future court proceedings, bail is good. And if people pooled their money to get her bailed out, fine. I don't see any problem with that. Corey announced that she intended to re-prosecute Alexander this time, aiming for 3 consecutive 20-year sentences, amounting to a mandatory 60-year sentence if Alexander is found guilty in a second trial. So she sees her estranged husband, pulls out a gun, aims, and fires. She claims she only was trying to scare him, send a warning shot or whatever, and she's facing 60 years for that. Now, why? Well, Florida passed this law that stated that sentences have to be carried out consecutively. So Angela Corey, by the way, who was getting slaughtered by everybody here, she really didn't have much choice. If she's going after the 20, they have to stack the 3 on each other. The fact that she's facing a mandatory 60-year sentence is really not so much on Angela Corey's lap. A lot of people have made this as, well, she doubled down or tripled down in this case, that, well, you may think that 20 years is tough. How about 60? That's not what happened here. The law changed, and they basically stated, no, she has to serve them consecutively. It's a terrible law, horrible law. And where are they getting the 3 from? Well, there were 3 people that she fired at, and they're claiming all 3 were injured as a part of this deal emotionally, and therefore it has to be done consecutively. Terrible law. Florida needs to do something about that. They may have already. On January 27, 2015, Alexander was released from a Jacksonville jail under a plea deal that capped her sentence to the 3 years she had already served. So she really lucked out here. Most likely, they threw that 60 years at her to get her to cop the plea. They basically said, you're facing 60 years. Don't you want to go ahead and take this 3-year deal? And since she had already served it, why not? So this was a no-brainer as far as Alexander was concerned. She was very lucky, though, that she was offered it. She pleaded guilty to 3 counts of aggravated assault for firing a shot in the direction of her husband. I didn't look at that up, but that's probably a felony. She also agreed to serve 2 years of house arrest, wearing an ankle monitor. She will be allowed to work, attend classes, and take her children to school and medical appointments. Her case helped to inspire a new state law permitting warning shots in some circumstances. Okay, so what is the gist of all this? Well, this trial was one where, again, misinformation was spread out all over the place. And they made it sound as if she was basically hunted down by this prosecutor. In reality, she is kind of guilty. I think that she went over there to his house pretty upset. She took a gun, tried to shoot him and then claimed that she couldn't escape. I don't buy it. I think that she just simply went berserk. Should she serve 60 years? Oh, hell no. If she had ended up hitting him with a bullet, maybe. But 60 years is a long time. Hell, I think most murderers don't get that. And I don't think that she had much of a past history, criminal history. I think that she's been pretty clean. So, yeah, the 20 years was way too much for what she did, in my opinion. Now, the next part of this is they rake Angela Corey over the coals. Now, who's Angela Corey? Have you heard that name before? Yes, Zimmerman, George Zimmerman. Angela Corey was the one that prosecuted George Zimmerman, and she had very little evidence to go on, and he obviously didn't get prosecuted, but she tried to take him down. So the whole idea that somehow Angela Corey is racist doesn't really hold up here. After all, Zimmerman killed Trayvon Martin. Trayvon Martin is black. She tried to get George Zimmerman convicted for that. Where's the racism? Now, if you think somehow that, well, what's the evidence also? I mean, is there more evidence that Angela Corey is not so bad? Here it is. Corey was criticized for her handling of the case by Democratic Florida Congresswoman Corrina Brown, who argued that Corey overcharged Alexander, and the result of Alexander's case was a consequence of institutional racism. Corrina Brown probably can't spell half the words in that sentence. She comes off as maybe one of the dumbest congresswomen or congresspersons in history. So, the fact that Corrina Brown has criticized her, maybe Angela Corey isn't so bad after all. But it gets better. Here comes Mariam Kaba. I don't think I know who that is. And then the Reverend Jesse Jackson. Anti-domestic violence advocates, civil rights groups, and others also supported the call for Alexander's release from prison. So, again, this is what happens when misinformation dominates the day. Do I think that Alexander is guilty of a crime here? Yes. Do I think she should be serving 20 years? No. But 3 years? That's probably pretty reasonable. And it goes on to discuss other people that were all over her. Now called for Corey to resign over the case, saying Corey was misusing her office and endangering domestic violence survivors. Well, let's see here. Wait a minute. Let's back up here. Isn't the victim here, which is the gray dude, the husband, estranged husband, isn't he a domestic violence victim? She shot at him. So all of a sudden, domestic violence survivors should be interpreted as female domestic violence survivors. Color of Change stated they would attempt to collect 100,000 signatures to remove Corey from the case. Well, I think that at this point that she's really not on it. Well, maybe they were talking about the retrial. Corey also defended herself by saying that she believes Alexander fired the weapon out of anger and not fear, and that she endangered the lives of Gray's 2 children in the process. Corey said she discharged a gun to kill them. Now you think, well, that's crazy. But keep in mind, they had a trial. The trial heard all the evidence, and the jury deliberated for 12 minutes. So it sounds to me like that maybe things aren't quite so stacking up for Alexander as people believe. So I went digging in a little bit more. This is just Wikipedia. You can't trust everything here. So I decided to look around, and I found an article here on a website called The Grio. And it's titled, Angela Corey Lashes Out at Critics of Marissa Alexander Prosecution. So this is going to be Angela Corey's side of things. And that's always good to hear. You know, before you start bashing, listen to what the other person has to say. You know what? You might have it all wrong. And is that true for the Kyle Rittenhouse case? Oh yeah, definitely. People are not looking at it from both sides. They have decided to go after Kyle, and the evidence means nothing to them. They don't care. They just want him convicted. So let's see what Angela Corey has to say. The fiery prosecutor, known for her fierce victims advocacy, takes issue with the protests and the outrage on Alexander's behalf, saying the Jacksonville woman was the aggressor, not the victim in the August 2010 incident. Because she was not fleeing from an abuser, Corey told the Grio, an answer to why Florida's stand your ground law was not applied in Alexander's case, even though Florida's Supreme Court has ruled in the past that a woman being abused in her own home by her husband has no duty to flee. Keep in mind something, though. Who is making that claim? The Grio. Notice, that Supreme Court ruling is not cited here. Let me check and see if maybe it's down below. Nope. So, what does the Supreme Court case actually say? Well, Supreme Court rulings are made very narrowly. They write them that way so that they pertain to the particular circumstances of that case. One way to misinterpret a Supreme Court case is to extend its reach broader than it's supposed to. I'm not certain what case the Grio is referring to here, but they may not have this right. It may not say that at all. For example, it says here, even though Florida Supreme Court has ruled in the past that a woman being abused in her own home by her husband has no duty to flee, but that could mean being abused at that time, not a past history of abuse. So you see, you have to be very careful. Don't take people's word for it. Go to the Supreme Court case or whatever case law you have, read it. Under what circumstances are they referring to? And you have to be careful about interpreting it too loosely. Corey says, a judge heard all the facts and evidence and said that this was not a case of stand your ground, Corey said. You have to compare what Marissa Alexander said to what the victims said. There were 2 young children there as well. None of the physical evidence corroborates her story. There was the 911 call, and you can clearly hear the distress in Rico Gray's voice. They had a verbal argument in which he said, I'm out of here, and she said, I've got something for you. What we see here kind of paints a different picture, doesn't it? And by the way, going back to that Supreme Court case, it's up to the judge to make that decision. The judge is going to read that case and decide whether the facts in this case match up to that Supreme Court case, and he'll instruct the jury accordingly. It's not up to Angela Corey. So something about text messages. When Gray saw the text, a fight ensued in the home's master bathroom, which eventually spilled out into the kitchen. At some point, Alexander went to the garage and got her semi-automatic pistol. She has claimed she went into the garage to flee, but the automatic door wasn't working, and she realized she had left her keys and cell phone inside. For whatever reason, she went back into the house and confronted Gray, firing a single shot, which Lincoln Alexander and Marissa on her website maintained was a warning shot fired into the air. The question now becomes, why didn't the garage open? As we said earlier, they investigated. It worked fine. So it sounds to me like she went into the garage because she's mad, got her gun, and went back to teach him a lesson. But Corey says that the shot was fired at adult height, which we read in the Wikipedia article, directly at Gray, who was standing in the adjacent living room with his sons, who were aged 9 and 13 at the time. Gray told the boys, get your clothes, we're out of here. And she went in the garage and into the glove compartment, got out a gun, got it in a ready-to-fire position. It's a semi-automatic and had the safety off, and she had a round in the chamber. I think that Corey is basically trying to sound like she's knowledgeable of guns. And she walked back into the kitchen and fired the gun at him. He was standing in the living room, and it went through the wall at about adult height and ricocheted off the roof of the wall. There's some really poor writing here. There's a lot of grammatical mistakes, or actually typos. And thank God it didn't hit one of the kids. Well, it didn't, okay? The police report states that Alexander claimed she fired the weapon to scare Gray because he was coming towards her. Again, that's where the mistake was made. She needed to talk to her lawyer. It says the police report states. So she told this to the police at the time. Never talked to the police. But Corey insists that the idea that she fired a warning shot is absolutely not what the physical evidence showed. Police retrieved a shell casing from the kitchen floor, the weapon which was lying on the living room table, and they observed the bullet hole which had gone through the kitchen wall and lodged in the ceiling. The outrage over Alexander's prosecution, swift conviction, the jury was out for just under 13 minutes, and 20-year sentence has revolved in large part around the negative perception of Gray, a man who admitted to past incidents of domestic violence, including a 2009 incident that put Alexander in the hospital after he shoved her into a bathtub, causing her to hit her head. Corey sees him as a victim, pure and simple, on that day. So basically she's saying, yeah, he's a real jackass, but on that day, she was the aggressor. He was either prosecuted for that, and there were restraining orders about that. She emphasizes that both parties took out restraining orders against each other. And she adds that only becomes relevant as to whether he was endangering her at that moment. So basically she's saying, no matter what the passive violence was, at that moment, she was the aggressor. Corey says Alexander had no injuries consistent with abuse on that day. She said if she had, they would have been visible in her booking photo. Well, I'm not so sure about that. Or in the booking admission report when she was taken to the Duval County Jail. And that's after the SWAT team had to respond to the house to get her to come outside. Oh, that's okay. That changes things a little bit too. So she's inside the house. She fires a shot. Somebody called the police. The SWAT team has to show up and get her to come outside. So, okay, that's interesting. Lincoln Alexander has told the Griot the police never bothered to look for more evidence of Gray's abuse, including what her family insists was a bathroom door damaged when Gray shoved Alexander into it. But Corey is unimpressed. The bottom line is, if he damaged a bathroom door, I know that my lawyers fully addressed issues such as that, and if the judge had believed that was a credible way things had happened, I believe the judge would have given that credence in the stand your ground hearing. However, there's no proof that that happened. And she insists that the law doesn't distinguish between a victim with a history of violence and one without one, and that's true. Now, if you don't know what happened, then the person's past criminal history can be brought up as evidence that most likely that person was the aggressor, okay? But in terms of being a victim, you can't say that, well, this person wasn't really a victim because he was a criminal in the past. It doesn't work like that. So if we go to Joseph Rosenbaum, Kyle can't claim that he fired in self-defense because of Joseph Rosenbaum's past criminal history. Oh, Rosenbaum has got a bunch. However, the fact that Rosenbaum was nuts does play a role in determining what actually happened there. So you have to be kind of careful with these kind of things. A person's propensity for violence is only one factor that would have allowed her to use stand your ground at the moment when she fired. If that's what you're saying, she can walk into a room and just see him and shoot. Exactly. You see the parallel with the Kyle Rittenhouse. He was carrying that rifle around because he was out to kill people. Doesn't mean that you could just open fire on him or attack him. And what does it say about her fear of Rico Gray that she disobeyed a sitting judge and went over to confront him? Okay, so the judge had a restraining order placed on her to stay away from Rico, and she went over to Rico's house. Not a good thing to do. Essentially, she could have stayed away from him. That's what they're saying. And if she did fear that he was a threat to her, she can't go and head him off at the pass by taking the first action. She can't go over there and shoot him because she fears that he might attack her. It doesn't work like that. I understand a lot of people wish they would, but it doesn't. You can't make preemptive strikes. I just don't understand where just the one-sided story has come out, Corey said, lashing out at both the media coverage and the loud cries of unfairness on the radio and internet. Oh boy, doesn't this sound similar? Yeah, Kyle Rittenhouse. A lot of people wondering, how is it that Kyle's been labeled a white supremacist and a Nazi and out to kill people, mass murderer? He's planning to kill people. How did that start? The same thing. The people don't care. They just want a good target. And Angela Corey is a good target for these people. So they're going to make stuff up. They don't care. I mean, the truth means nothing. You don't believe me? I got a video coming out on the Michael Brown case. You want to hear people lying? There you go. The facts in the Alexander case are a matter of he said, she said, except that Gray's account was initially backed up by his two sons, aged 9 and 13 at the time, for whom Alexander was also charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. We know that. She was convicted of 3 counts, one against Gray and each son. Even though Gray's older son later changed his story, saying he was never in fear for his life as he first told police. Okay, well, guess what? I get it. He is saying now that he was never in fear of his life, but he told the police earlier that he was. Corey says the son never cooperated Alexander's version of events, but she does admit that his story changed. She says, even after he had looked me in the eye and told me he was afraid. And the bottom line is the other child never changed his story. So I still have a victim who said he was in fear. Corey said the assumption that her prosecutors failed to take Gray's violent past with Alexander into account is false. She didn't have to get 20 years because I took into account their prior domestic history and her lack of a criminal record, and we offered her the 3-year mandatory minimum in a plea bargain attempt before the trial. Corey said that the offer was made last October when she met with both Alexander and her attorney, Kevin Cobbin. Okay, so she has an attorney, good, and separately with Gray. As to why she never offered probation, Corey said that Alexander wasn't a good candidate. And why? Basically, she said that she violated a restraining order. And violating a restraining order basically does not make her a good candidate for probation. I don't know about that one, but, that's her claim. So she goes on to explain why she offered her the 3-year minimum. I was using my discretion to waive the statutory maximum and offered her a 3-year sentence with credit for time served. 3 years for 2 reasons. She fired a gun and she was not a candidate for probation. I just don't understand the interest or outrage in this case. Where is the interest in my 2 young black victims who don't have a choice about who their dad marries, who can't sit down and watch TV and play video games without a woman walking into the home and firing a gun in their direction? And as for Gray, she said that while he may not be a sympathetic figure to the public, neither are the drug dealers around here who get shot and killed. Whether they're sympathetic or not, it's not anybody's right to take their life. I looked at him and said he doesn't seem to be this monster that the defense said he was. I don't know, he sounds pretty bad. Again, it's not relevant though. He can still be a victim. But Gray does, in many ways, fit the description of a monster. He outweighed Alexander by 100 pounds and is 3 inches taller. And besides his 2 arrests for domestic violence, there were his own statements in a deposition of Marissa's case in which he admitted, oh boy, I got 5 baby mamas and I put my hands on every last one of them except for one. Why would you tell the police this? That the way I was with women, and they had to walk on eggshells around me. Oh yeah, nice guy. Yeah, that's a monster. Sorry, Angela. No, that's pretty bad. 2 of those women got hit in the mouth by Gray because, in his own words, they just wouldn't shut up. I sympathize with you to a certain Gray, but you can't hit them. Oh man, why would you tell the police this? On the night of August 1st, Gray admitted to prosecutors that he told Marissa he'd kill her if she ever cheated on him, and that on that night he said to her, if I can't have you, nobody's going to have you. Gee, that's kind of a cliche. I think that if I was Marissa, I would tell her, oh, come on, can't you come up with something a little bit more creative? He admitted he was in a rage and said he told her that he knew people who could do his dirt for him, who could hurt her. Wow, this is pretty bad. Gray said he blocked her from leaving the bathroom, and when asked if he pushed Alexander into the bathroom door hard enough to crack it, he answered, probably. Asked whether he put his hands around her neck, Gray answered, not that particular day. This sounds like Ike Turner, right? What was it Ike Turner said about Tina? Like, I didn't hit my wife any more than most husbands, or something like that. It's like, yeah, okay, Ike, this sounds very much like him. I understand domestic situations are volatile and they're complicated, said Corey. Yeah, but no, that's no excuse for this. But the bottom line is she fired a loaded welcome directly at a man and his 2 sons, and we cannot allow that as a way to solve domestic disputes. A loaded welcome? I have never heard that phrase before. Interesting. Okay, so let's skip down a little bit. There's an interesting thing here. Gray said in the deposition that he told police Alexander had threatened to kill him that night because he was angry, though he later changed the story again, saying he had lied in the deposition in order to protect Marissa and that he had feared for his life that day. So basically, he's making a claim that all those things that he admitted earlier to doing to her, he had made those up because he didn't really want her to go to prison. That does happen. And so, don't know. You can see how hard this is. Both sides seem to be incapable of telling the truth. And so it's really hard to tell what happened, but it doesn't really look good for Marissa Alexander. It does look like she sort of was the primary aggressor here and made some really bad choices. She should have stayed away from the house. If she had, none of this would have happened. Now, you might think, oh, what about Kyle? If he had stayed home, none of this would have happened. But keep in mind, she went to his house and took a shot at him. There's no evidence that she needed to do that. Kyle didn't go to Joseph Rosenbaum's home, go inside, and then try to shoot him. He was walking down the street. Rosenbaum attacked him. So they're not that similar at all. So what can we learn from this? Well, first of all, 1, don't talk to the police. I'm telling you, don't talk to the cops. Also, be careful about what you hear. They have this Angela Corey lady pegged down as racist witch out to throw black people in jail. And the truth of it is, she was out going after George Zimmerman on behalf of Trayvon Martin. There are some arguments here that she really wasn't going after this Marissa Alexander that harshly, and a lot of this is just really Florida having laws that are really strict. So again, try to read both sides, dive deep, and see what you can find. And I will leave it at that. Like my video and subscribe to my channel.